We are Mike Hall and Heather Sorsted. We manage the Yorkton Research Farm, which is a collaborative effort between the East Central Research Foundation and Parkland College. ECRF is part of the AgriArm network of research farms across Saskatchewan. There are 8 of us in total. If you would like more information about us, you can simply go to www.ecrf.ca. At that site, you will also access short videos covering the results of many different research trials we have conducted. My topic today is about getting the most out of nitrogen. How can we apply nitrogen to minimize losses and increase net returns? Well, first we need to review how are we losing nitrogen. There are 2 forms of nitrogen that are taken up by plants, ammonium and nitrate. Nitrate is the predominant form. When you apply urea, 4600, it is first converted into ammonia. If that ammonia is near the surface of the soil, it can be lost to the air, particularly on our high pH soils, which drive the equilibrium between ammonium and ammonia towards the production of the ammonia side. Volatilization is less on acidic soils. If timely and adequate rainfall is received, the urea will dissolve and move underground, where the ammonia produced is more likely to grab a proton from the soil water and become ammonium. This is good. We want it to be in the ammonium form because it's stable and it won't leach. Unfortunately, the ammonium will convert to nitrate, which has other issues. While the nitrate will not volatilize, it can be leached below the root zone or be lost to denitrification. Denitrification occurs when soils are waterlogged. The bacteria can't breathe under these conditions and will use the nitrate as an oxygen source, and the nitrogen will be released back into the atmosphere as dinitrogen gas. Nitrogen can also be tied up by immobilization. The N technically hasn't been lost to the system, it's just being used in the bodies of microbes. If you want a pile of straw to rot, pour water and nitrogen on it. To quote Cindy Grant, in-soil banding at or near the time of seeding is considered the best management practice for nitrogen fertilization on the prairies. It can reduce the risk of nitrogen losses from volatilization, immobilization, denitrification, and leaching. Volatilization has been reduced because the fertilizer is underground and won't gas off. Immobilization is reduced because the fertilizer is in a tight band and underground away from the no-till straw. Denitrification and leaching are reduced because we are applying the fertilizer close to when the crop needs it. There simply is less time for these losses to occur. I've just described 2 of the 4 R's of nitrogen management. The right place is underground, and the right time is close to when the crop needs it. The right rate just simply means don't apply more than your crop requires. And the right form sort of comes into play when the logistics stop you from doing the right place and time. Logistics and time constraints may mean the producer may want to broadcast the fertilizer on top and apply it in the fall before the crop. In this scenario, you might want to manage the risk by using nitrogen stabilizing products, such as found in Super U and Agritane. Using products like UAN over urea may reduce losses as well. Adding ammonium thiosulfate, liquid sulfur, has also been shown to be a nitrification and urease inhibitor to some extent. So let's look at this more closely. How can we protect surface applications of nitrogen from loss? Well, an example of a urease inhibitor is NBPT, which is in products such as Agritane, Anvil, and Super U. Super U also contains a nitrification inhibitor, but we will get to that in a minute. Urease inhibitors are in slowing down the hydrolysis of urea into ammonia, which can just gas away. You still need rain to move the nitrogen underground, but now you can wait a little longer for that rain. Super U also contains DCD, which is a nitrification inhibitor, slowing down the conversion of ammonia to nitrate. So by keeping the nitrogen in the ammonia form longer, we can reduce leaching and denitrification losses. Dribble banding UAN generally results in less loss of nitrogen through volatilization and immobilization than broadcasting urea. This is because 25% of the nitrogen is in the nitrate form, which is not prone to volatilization. Applying a concentrated band means less contact with soil residues and microbes, which means less immobilization and leaching and denitrification. Finally, UAN doesn't increase soil pH around the fertilizer like urea does. Remember, increasing pH drives the equilibrium to ammonia instead of ammonium. So now that we've had a little review, let's get to the first trial results from Yorkton in 2018. This trial came about because producers on the ECRF board were concerned about all the fertilizer that was being broadcasted on snow, especially since the practice is not even allowed in Manitoba. So we developed a trial that compared 3 fall timings of urea and Super U against banded urea in the fall or side-banded urea at seeding. Fall banding of urea is not really practice, but was meant to be a simulation of fall banding and anhydrous. The early fall timing was October 2nd, and this is considered too early to broadcast urea because it provides a lot of time before freeze-up for the urea to be converted to nitrate and then later to be lost to denitrification when the soils are waterlogged in spring. October 27th was the late fall timing, which is considered ideal. Then our early winter application on 10 centimeters of snow was November 5th. This is how the field looked when we were broadcasting fertilizer on the snow. The results from this demonstration pretty much met our expectations. The blue bars in the graph represent yield, and the orange line represents grain protein. Remember, each one of these treatments has received the same amount of nitrogen, which is 80 pounds per acre. I kept the low rate to increase the chance of detecting yield and protein differences between treatments. If I were to apply excessive amounts of nitrogen, I might not detect yield and protein differences between treatments, even though some of the treatments may have lost considerable nitrogen. This is because the system is overloaded with nitrogen. Treatment 8 is urea side-banded at seeding and is the check, as it represents the most efficient way to apply nitrogen. This treatment produced more grain with higher protein than any of the fall applied nitrogen. This is not surprising, as side-banded nitrogen at seeding is considered to be the ideal time and placement for nitrogen. Broadcasting nitrogen in the fall is not ideal because it provides more opportunity for nitrogen to be lost to volatilization, denitrification, and leaching. Grain yield and protein were considerably less when urea was broadcasted in early fall on October 2nd. Broadcasting in early fall provided lots of time for urea to be converted to nitrate before freeze-up. Once nitrogen is in the nitrate form, it's vulnerable to denitrification and leaching loss. Broadcasted nitrogen was also likely lost to volatilization. In the end, broadcasting urea in early fall resulted in a loss of 21 bushels per acre and a loss of 1.6% protein relative to side-banding the urea at seeding. Broadcasting Super U instead of straight urea in early fall increased yield by 9 bushels per acre and grain protein by 0.7%. Less nitrogen was lost by using Super U treated urea because it provides some protection from volatilization, denitrification, and leaching. Broadcasting urea in late fall on October 27th resulted in less nitrogen loss, more yield, and higher protein compared to the early fall application because there was less time for the urea to be converted to nitrate before freeze-up. Again, the use of Super U instead of urea increased yield and protein, but the difference for the late fall application was more modest as losses at this time of application were less. Late fall banding of urea also produced good yield results as banding protects the urea from volatilization and inhibits the conversion of urea to nitrate. Yield and grain protein levels were also poor when urea was broadcast in early winter on 10 centimeters of snow. Broadcasting urea in early winter on snow is not a recommended practice because N losses with this timing can be quite high, particularly if the ground is frozen beneath the snow. Frozen ground impedes the movement of the nitrogen into the soil, increasing the potential for nitrogen loss to volatilization and runoff in spring. Broadcasting Super U instead of urea at this time did little to improve the situation. But how did the economics pan out? Because these nitrogen stabilizing products cost money. Here are the gross returns per acre minus the cost of nitrogen for each treatment. Remember, every treatment is receiving 80 pounds of nitrogen per acre. These values assume wheat at 12.5% protein is worth $10 per bushel. The protein spread is wide at 60 cents per percent per bushel. Anything above 12.5% protein would get a premium, and anything below would get a discount. The cost of urea is $1.13 per pound of nitrogen, which is the same as $1,146 per ton. And the cost of Super U is $1.31 per pound of nitrogen, or $1,328 per ton. Sidebanding urea at seeding, which is the right time and place for nitrogen, is the check, and provided the greatest economic returns by far. I'm going to change the numbers beside the bars to represent the economic loss relative to this check. The worst thing to do was to broadcast the urea early in fall. It resulted in an economic loss of $268 per acre in this study. Using Super U really paid for itself when urea was broadcast in early fall. It generated $96 per acre more, and that's after accounting for its extra cost. However, broadcasting urea at the ideal time in late fall generated more income than using Super U when broadcasting early. Using Super U increased returns by $29 per acre for the late fall application. So it's still providing an economic benefit even though we broadcast fertilizer at the ideal time in late fall. The economics went downhill when we applied the urea and Super U on 10 centimeters of snow in early winter. The Super U wasn't giving much of an economic benefit when used at this time. The most economic way to apply nitrogen in the fall was fall banding. I realize nobody really does this, but this was my poor simulation of banded anhydrous in fall. If we use historic prices of $6 per bushel of wheat, urea at 50 cents a pound of nitrogen, and Super U at 68 cents a pound, then gross returns minus nitrogen costs are lower, and so are differences between treatments. However, the story is still the same. It is still best to sideband the urea at seeding. Super U is still providing an economic return when used at early and late fall applications, but the benefits are smaller. Note I'm maintaining a price differential of 18 cents a pound for Super U, or $180 per ton. If we reduce the protein premium spread to 10 cents per percent per bushel, the economic differences reduce further, but the story is still unchanged. We are currently involved in a similar but larger study led by Kim Stonehouse with Sask Ag. The study won't be completed until the end of this year, but he was kind enough to share the 2020 results with me so far. I've taken the liberty to combine the results from Prince Albert, Outlook, and Melfort. There are no statistics here, just treatment means. I didn't include the results from my location at Yorkton or the results from Swift Current, as both these sites suffered severe drought. Yields were low, grain proteins through the roof. There was just a lot of nitrogen in the system, so detecting losses via yield and protein differences was not possible. On average, 140 pounds of nitrogen per acre was applied to the 3 sites. That's a lot more than the 80 pounds of nitrogen per acre I used in my initial study at Yorkton. I don't think it's a good idea to be going with such a high rate of nitrogen because it makes it harder to detect differences between the N efficiency. Let's say 120 pounds of nitrogen is essentially maximizing yield and protein. If you apply 140 and lose 20, how do you know? Anyway, despite the high rate of nitrogen, there are some familiar trends with this data. Like before, our side-banded check has one of the highest yields and by far the highest protein. This group of treatments had urea broadcasted in mid-November. The straight urea, treatment 1, is not performing as well as the Super U treatment 2 or Anvil treatment 3, Anvil is similar to agrotane in that it is only protecting against volatilization losses. Super U, of course, is protecting against volatilization and denitrification losses. These same forms of urea were broadcasted in early February and are doing a little worse. Let me just say, for those of us with lots of snow in February, applying these treatments were challenging and seemed a little ridiculous. These fertilizers were then broadcasted again in early April. Super U and Anvil seem to be doing us some good at this time. Here are the economics, assuming $10 per bushel of wheat and a protein premium spread of 60 cents per percent per bushel. We have $1.13 per pound of nitrogen as urea and $1.31 per pound of nitrogen as Super U and $1.21 per pound of nitrogen as Anvil. Again, our side-banded urea check in red is providing the best returns. The boxes in red now represent the economic losses per acre relative to the side-banded check. Super U and Anvil reduced economic losses when urea was broadcasted mid-November. They also reduced losses when broadcasted in early April. In contrast, they made the economic situation worse when broadcasted in February. Broadcasting on snow just isn't a great idea. So how would UAN dribble banded in fall compare? I haven't done this comparison. In terms of volatilization, it should be less prone to loss than straight urea because it's in a concentrated band which decreases the fertilizer's contact with the soil. This slows the conversion of urea portion to ammonium, which gases off. Also, 25% of the nitrogen is in the nitrate form, which is not prone to volatilization. However, that nitrate portion will be prone to leaching and denitrification. But overall, I think it would perform better than a broadcast urea, even though it is still prone to all the losses. UAN also does not increase soil pH around the fertilizer like urea does. When pH is increased, this drives the ratio between ammonia and ammonium towards the ammonia side, which is what gases off. However, if 75% of the nitrogen is in the form that could be lost to volatilization, this risk can be reduced by adding agrotane to the UAN. So, in conclusion, if you can't sideband it all at seeding, put it down in late fall, but don't put it on snow, and don't put it down too early. If you can't put it in the ground, use a nitrogen stabilizing product.